My name is Ratana. I'm 67 years old, and I want to tell you something that took me most of my life to understand, something so close to me, so woven into the fabric of my daily existence that I walked past it every single day without seeing it. I walked through my own front door, moved through my own rooms, sat in my own kitchen, slept in my own bed, and never once considered that the very space I had built my life inside might be the thing quietly, consistently, invisibly working against the financial life I was trying so hard to create. I want you to think about your house right now, not as a building, not as a mortgage or a rent payment or a list of things that need fixing. Think of it as a living environment, as a space that breathes, that accumulates, that holds everything that has ever happened within its walls. The arguments, the worries, the sleepless nights, the years of barely enough, the fear that arrived with every unexpected bill, all of that is still there in some form, soaked into the air of the rooms you inhabit every day. And if it has never been cleared, if it has never been intentionally addressed, it is still working, still sending a signal, still shaping the energy of what can enter and what cannot. That was the understanding that changed everything for me. But let me tell you where I was before I understood it, because the distance between where I was and where I arrived is the most honest part of this story. I was in my mid-40s. I had been working steadily for over 2 decades, managing my household carefully, making decisions as wisely as I knew how. And yet my financial life had a quality to it that I can only describe as stuck. Not dramatically stuck, not the kind of stuck that announces itself loudly and demands immediate attention. The quiet kind. The kind that feels almost normal because it has been consistent for so long that you can no longer see it as something wrong. You simply begin to believe that this is what your life is, that this is the shape of what is available to you. I had stopped questioning it. And the moment you stop questioning something, it becomes the walls of your reality. It was a woman I met unexpectedly, an older woman at a gathering I had almost not attended, who asked me a question that I was not prepared for. She had never been to my home. She knew almost nothing about my life. But she looked at me with a directness that I found slightly unsettling and said simply, "Tell me about your house. What does it feel like to walk in the door?" I started to describe the physical space, the rooms, the layout, the furniture. She shook her head gently. "Not what it looks like," she said, "what it feels like." And I stopped, because I realized with a suddenness that surprised me that I had never been asked that question before, and that the honest answer was one I had been avoiding without knowing I was avoiding it. My house felt heavy. It had felt heavy for years. There was a particular quality to the air when I came home, a quality that was not quite relief, not quite comfort, not quite the feeling of arriving somewhere safe and replenishing. It was more like arriving somewhere that expected something from me, that asked more of me the moment I crossed the threshold, that took rather than gave. I had explained this away with busyness, with the demands of family life, with the natural weight of adult responsibility. But in that moment, hearing myself say it to a stranger who was listening without judgment, I began to wonder whether the house itself had something to do with it. She said, "Every house accumulates the energy of what has lived inside it. If you have lived inside financial fear, inside constant struggle, inside the low hum of not enough, that energy doesn't disappear when the day ends. It stays, it builds, and eventually, without you realizing it, the house begins to reflect it back to you. The house begins to hold that frequency as its natural state. And everything that tries to enter in contradiction to that frequency, including prosperity, including abundance, including the feeling of being provided for, has difficulty getting through. I drove home that evening, thinking about almost nothing else. And when I walked through my front door, I paid attention in a way I never had before. I felt what I felt. I noticed what I noticed. And what I noticed was that she was right. The house had a frequency. And the frequency was not one that welcomed what I was trying to build. That was the beginning of a process that unfolded over many months. A process of understanding what specifically in my house was contributing to that frequency, and what I could do practically and intentionally to change it. Let me share with you what I discovered, because you deserve the honesty of specifics and not just the inspiration of generalities. The first thing I discovered was that the flow of my house was blocked. Not metaphorically, physically and energetically. There were areas where movement was impeded. Furniture pushed too close together so that walking through a room required navigating rather than moving freely. Doorways partially obstructed by objects that had accumulated without intention. Corners filled with things that had no clear purpose, but also no clear destination. When energy cannot flow freely through a space, the energy of the space stagnates, and stagnant energy does not support prosperity. Prosperity requires movement, it requires flow, it requires the same ease of circulation that good health requires in the body. I began to create flow. I moved furniture. I cleared doorways completely. I took everything that had been sitting in corners without purpose and made a decision about each piece. Does this belong in my home, or does it belong outside it? Does this contribute to the feeling of this space, or does it diminish it? Those questions, applied honestly and without sentiment, changed the physical environment of my home in ways that were immediately, noticeably felt. The second thing I discovered was that my home was full of unfinished stories, objects that represented things I had started and not completed. Relationships that had ended badly, but whose reminders were still on my shelves. Gifts from people whose memory brought discomfort rather than warmth. Photographs from chapters of my life I had officially closed, but not energetically released. All of these things were speaking inside my home, constantly, in the background, a low, continuous conversation about incompletion, and unresolved things. The energy of incompletion is one of the most significant blockers of financial flow that I have encountered in all my years of paying attention to these things. Because incompletion says, on an energetic level, that things don't finish well here, that beginnings don't lead to satisfying endings, that what is started cannot be trusted to arrive at a place of wholeness. And financial abundance requires exactly the opposite belief. It requires the sense that things can come to fruition, that what is planted can grow fully, that there is a wholeness available in this space. I released the unfinished stories, not all at once, not without some difficulty. Some of those objects had been in my home for so long they felt like part of the structure, but I released them, with gratitude for what they had meant, and with the clear understanding that what they now meant was limitation, and limitation was not something I was willing to continue housing. The third thing I discovered was that the energy of financial fear had specific locations in my home. There were places where the anxiety of money had been most concentrated. The desk where I had sat with bills I couldn't pay. The kitchen table where difficult conversations about finances had taken place. The bedroom where I had lain awake calculating and recalculating what was owed and what was available. These spaces had absorbed those experiences. They carried them still. I began to deliberately reclaim those spaces, not by avoiding them, but by introducing new experiences and new energies into them. I brought fresh flowers to the kitchen table. I lit a candle at the desk and sat there not to calculate what I owed, but to plan what I was building. I changed the positioning of things in the bedroom to shift the energetic memory of that space from one of anxious nighttime calculation to one of rest and renewal. These were not large gestures, but they were consistent. And consistency is what reprograms the energy of a space over time, because a space responds to what happens within it most frequently and most consistently. The fourth thing I discovered was that my house had very little living energy inside it. No plants, no moving water, no element that breathed or grew or circulated. The house was static, and static environments support static lives. I introduced plants, chosen not randomly, but with the understanding that living things bring living energy. Plants breathe alongside you. They grow. They renew themselves. They introduce into a space the subtle but very real energy of life that chooses to continue, that reaches toward the light, that does not give up. I placed a small water feature in my main room, nothing elaborate, something simple that kept water moving. Because moving water, as so many ancient traditions understood, carries the energy of flow, of circulation, of abundance that does not stagnate, but moves constantly, generously, from one place to the next and back again. The fifth thing I discovered was perhaps the most unexpected of all. The entrance of my home, The threshold, the first space that greeted me when I arrived, and the first space that visitors encountered, was energetically the weakest point in the house. It was cluttered, it was dim. It was not a space that communicated welcome or invitation. It was a space that communicated overwhelm. Shoes scattered, bags dropped, a surface piled with things that had nowhere else to go. And yet the entrance is the most important energetic space in any home, because the entrance is where the outside world meets the inside world. It is where energy decides whether to enter or to hesitate at the threshold. An entrance that is cluttered, dim, and unwelcoming communicates to the energetic field of your life the same thing it communicates to a human visitor who arrives there. This is not a place that is ready to receive. I cleared the entrance completely. I kept it clean with a consistency I had not applied to it before. I placed something living there, a small plant that reached upward toward the light that came through the door each morning. I made it a space that said clearly in its own physical language, "Welcome. You are expected here. There is room for you." And then I noticed over the weeks that followed that I felt different when I came home. The heaviness that had greeted me at the door for years began to ease. The sense of arriving somewhere that demanded rather than replenished began to shift. I began to come home to a space that felt, for the first time in a very long time, like it was on my side. That shift in how the house felt changed how I moved through it, how I thought inside it, how I planned and hoped and imagined within its walls. And those changes in thought and feeling produced changes in action. And those changes in action produced changes in result. Within 6 months of beginning this process, my financial situation had begun to move in ways I had not managed to engineer through any external strategy in the years before. Not dramatically, not with the sudden flood of fortune that makes for an exciting story, but with a steadiness, a consistency, a sense of things finally being in motion rather than frozen, that felt more real and more sustainable than any quick change ever could have. I want to tell you something very directly before I close, because I believe you deserve directness more than you deserve comfort. Your house is not blocking your money because it is a bad house. It is not blocking your money because you are a bad person or an unlucky one or someone whom prosperity has decided to avoid. It is reflecting back to you the energetic reality of what has accumulated within it over time. And that reflection is information, not condemnation, not fate, information about what needs attention, what needs clearing, what needs to be intentionally, lovingly, honestly addressed. You have the power to change that reflection, not by spending money on elaborate renovations or by following a rigid system that someone else designed for a life that is not yours, but by walking through your own home with honest eyes, by feeling what it feels like to be in each room, by asking in each space, what the energy here has been and what you want it to be. And then, by making deliberate, intentional, loving changes that align the physical environment with the financial reality you are working to create. The house follows the intention. The intention follows the awareness. And the awareness begins the moment you stop walking past what you have always walked past and start truly seeing what is there. Today, I want to give you one thing to do, just one. Not a list of 7 steps or 12 changes to make simultaneously. One. Walk through your home tonight and find the space that feels the heaviest, the space where the energy feels most stuck, most resistant, most unlike the life you are trying to build. Stand in that space for a moment. Feel it without judgment. And then make one change, a real one, made with genuine presence and the clear understanding of why you are making it. Remove one thing that doesn't belong. Clear one surface that has been carrying what it shouldn't. Open one window to let the night air move through and carry some of what has accumulated outward. One change, made with intention, is the beginning of a different conversation between you and your home. And when your home begins to speak a different language, your financial life will begin to listen. If something in what I have shared today has landed in a place that feels true and real and close to your own experience, I want to invite you to stay in this space. Come back when the noise of daily life makes these quieter truths hard to hold on to. Subscribe and walk with me, because there is so much more I want to share with you from these years of paying very close attention to the invisible forces that shape the visible life. And in the comments, if you feel moved to share, tell me one word that describes how your home feels right now. Just one word, because naming what is there is always the first step toward changing it. I will be here, reading, thinking of you, and trusting that the home you are ready to create, the one that welcomes rather than withholds, the one that supports rather than drains, the one that speaks the language of abundance rather than the language of fear, is already closer than you know. You just have to begin the conversation tonight with one honest step through the space you already call home.